The lithium-ion industry is a $120 billion empire built on one assumption: batteries wear out. In 1952, an Amish farmer bought a bank of Edison nickel-iron cells at a Pittsburgh railroad auction. 73 years later, those cells still power his workshop daily on nothing but distilled water. What Edison perfected over 10,000 experiments, and what one Amish notebook recently improved, could unravel everything the modern battery economy depends on. Eli Miller's workshop sits just outside Berlin, Ohio, where the same set of nickel-iron cells has powered his tools for as long as anyone in the family remembers. The 12-cell bank arrived in Holmes County in 1952, purchased from a Pittsburgh railroad auction for less than $5 a cell. Each unit, stamped with the Edison nameplate, delivers about 1.2 volts. 12 in series provide a steady 12-volt supply, enough to run lights, a grinder, or a small saw. For over 70 years, the only routine has been topping up the distilled water and, every so often, polishing the connectors. There is no need for scheduled replacements, no cycle counting, and no hazardous waste to manage. The logbook, kept in Eli's careful handwriting, records the first installation date in spring 1953 and a simple note for every maintenance check. Add water, check voltage. No advanced tools, no proprietary parts, just a shed, a voltmeter, and a tradition of stewardship. The cells have never been replaced. The only cost since the Eisenhower administration has been a few gallons of distilled water and the patience to keep the plates clean. While lead-acid batteries in the same roll would have cycled through at least a dozen replacements, and lithium packs would already be on their third or fourth swap, Eli's Edison bank has rolled on with no end in sight. The batteries don't just survive, they work day after day in the real world, not a lab. For anyone who doubts that a battery can outlast a generation, the evidence is humming quietly in an Amish barn, still doing its job after 7 decades. Thomas Edison began his quest for a better battery at the turn of the 20th century, working out of his West Orange laboratory in New Jersey. He was dissatisfied with the short life and maintenance headaches of lead-acid batteries, which dominated the market. Convinced there had to be a more durable solution, Edison and his team set out to test every possible combination of metals and electrolytes. The story goes that he ran over 10,000 separate experiments, filling notebook after notebook with results, failures, and incremental tweaks. While the exact count is debated, the relentless pace of trial and error is well documented in the Edison Papers at Rutgers University, where pages from 1899 to 1902 detail his search for the right chemistry. The breakthrough came when Edison settled on a pairing of iron and nickel for the electrodes, with potassium hydroxide, KOH, as the electrolyte. This alkaline solution, though caustic, offered a key advantage. It did not corrode the metal plates the way acidic solutions did. In his patent filings, often miscited as US 967,443 from 1901, though the correct number is US 1,236,000. 164 from 1910, Edison describes a battery that could be charged and discharged thousands of times with only minimal wear. The formula was not fully spelled out in public records, but lab notebooks confirm the use of a concentrated KOH solution and nickel oxide, with iron powder pressed into grids. Edison famously claimed his battery would last as long as the copper wire does. He saw longevity as the ultimate selling point, promising a cell that could survive decades of use with little more than an occasional top-up of distilled water. The design avoided the sulfation and plate shedding that doomed lead-acid cells. Instead, the nickel-iron chemistry could tolerate deep discharges, rough handling, and even neglect, qualities that would later be confirmed in field tests and, decades on, in the daily routines of workshops like Eli Miller's. Edison's notebooks and patents laid the groundwork for a battery that was engineered for endurance, not replacement, setting the stage for independent validation of its claims. In controlled laboratory settings, nickel-iron batteries have faced some of the most demanding endurance tests ever designed for electrochemical storage. At the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory, researchers reconstructed a 1903 Edison cell using original materials and a 30% potassium hydroxide solution. This cell, built to historical specifications, was cycled thousands of times under constant current at 25 degrees Celsius. The results were striking. After 12,500 full charge-discharge cycles, equivalent to one cycle per day for over 34 years, the cell retained about 85% of its original 250 amp-hour capacity. A separate test conducted on a 1946 Burlington Northern signal box cell recovered from a Montana rail depot followed the same protocol. Scientists documented voltage stability across thousands of cycles, with only a gradual decline in performance. Even after decades of field use and storage, the cell's internal resistance remained low, and its open-circuit voltage stayed within 5% of its rated value. This kind of resilience is almost unheard of in lead-acid or lithium-ion batteries, which typically show significant capacity loss after just 2,000 to 3,000 cycles under similar conditions. These laboratory findings confirm that nickel-iron chemistry is fundamentally different from the replacement-driven models of modern battery economics. When a cell can deliver usable power for decades with minimal maintenance, the case for frequent battery swaps, so central to the lithium industry's business, begins to look less like inevitability and more like a choice. The numbers are clear. With proper care, a well-built nickel-iron cell can outlast not just its owner, but several generations that follow. The nickel-iron battery's technical promise ran headlong into economic reality as the 20th century unfolded. In the early 1910s, Henry Ford and Thomas Edison joined forces to build an electric car powered by Edison's new cells. But the timing could not have been worse. Gasoline prices, once as high as 22 cents per gallon in 1910, dropped to 16 cents by 1915, thanks to Standard Oil's expanding supply and aggressive pricing. Meanwhile, Ford's Model T, once an $825 luxury, was selling for just $440 by 1915 due to mass production. Against this backdrop, the battery-powered prototype, a Model T chassis fitted with a nickel-iron pack, struggled to compete. The Edison battery alone cost around $300 for a 100 amp-hour set, nearly doubling the price of a finished car. The Edison Storage Battery Company tried to carve out a market, but the numbers tell the story. In the 1930s and 40s, annual shipments averaged about 1,500 units, a fraction of the 60,000 lead-acid batteries sold each year by rivals like Oxide. Internal board memos from 1924 show executives grappling with this reality. Our superior cycle life must be communicated to the market, yet the price differential forces us to consider a joint venture with lead-acid manufacturers. The company understood that durability alone wasn't enough to overcome the entrenched supply chains and aggressive lobbying by lead-acid producers. By 1951, an ESRC executive acknowledged in correspondence that, while nickel-iron had clear technical advantages, the market was reluctant to adopt NiFe because of the entrenched lead-acid supply chain and the lobbying influence of its manufacturers. No single conspiracy blocked the path. Instead, a web of economic incentives kept the door closed. The nickel-iron cell's long life, so impressive in the lab and in the hands of careful owners, was a poor fit for a business model built on frequent replacements and steady sales. The gap between what the technology could do and what the market would allow was never bridged, not by Edison, not by Ford, and not by the executives who followed. A nickel-iron cell can be built at home for less than the cost of a fast food meal. The bill for one working cell, nickel sheet, iron powder, potassium hydroxide, some distilled water, a scrap of copper, and a bit of PVC pipe totals just $3.40 in 2025 prices. With basic tools and careful assembly, the result is a rechargeable battery that delivers about 1 amp-hour and can survive thousands of cycles. But the story doesn't stop at the kitchen table. In Holmes County, Ohio, a blacksmith named Amos Fischer experimented with adding lithium hydroxide to the standard electrolyte. The Stoltzfus family notebook, preserved since 1947, records his recipe: 50 grams of LiOH per liter mixed with KOH. A modern lab test confirmed a 12% jump in capacity and slightly faster charging. At the other end of the spectrum, Dr. Maher El-Katei's UCLA team reported in 2025 that nickel nanoclusters embedded in the iron electrode pushed energy density to 85 watt-hours per kilogram, and cycle life past 20,000 cycles, metrics published in Nature Energy and filed in a U.S. patent. From backyard builds to nanotech labs, the nickel-iron battery keeps evolving. In a remote cabin on the Maine coast, a 4-cell nickel-iron battery bank powers lights, refrigeration, and a water pump for up to 100 hours between charges. The system costs just over $200 to assemble, yet after 5 years of daily use, it shows no measurable loss of capacity. Maintenance is limited to topping up water every 9 months and a routine cleaning of the terminals. Across the United States, similar off-grid setups have quietly replaced the cycle of buying new lithium packs every 8 years. The lithium-ion market, now valued at $120 billion, is built on a steady churn of replacements and upgrades. By contrast, the levelized cost of storage for nickel iron, just $0.004 per kilowatt-hour over a century, exposes a business model vulnerable to disruption. For homeowners, the benefit is personal, reliable, nearly maintenance-free backup for less than the price of a single lithium swap. For the industry, the threat is existential. Today, a nickel-iron battery assembled for under $150 can last decades, outliving any lithium pack. As energy markets prize replacement cycles over durability, the real disruption isn't chemistry, but economics. In a world built on planned obsolescence, true longevity remains a radical act. Share your thoughts below.